Here it is. I find it aspirational, and I like that. It's a cheap watch, but they aspire to be a GMT. They're like, we'll put a word time bezel on it, and then you figure it out. And I find that very, very charming.
Greetings and welcome to this week's aBlogtoWatch Weekly. For those that are watching on video, and you can tune into this show as a live recording on a Tuesday morning around about 7:30 in the morning UK time on aBlogtoWatch Weekly Live. For those watching, they will notice one huge difference today. There is no wall supporting Ripley sellers.
It's just a knob.
It's he's sitting in front of a door. Either it's a really tall door, Ripley's really short, or he's sitting down. There's something.
He's barricading the door. Obviously,
he's barricading it.
No one can come in and disturb the podcast.
I actually didn't realize that. I should. Yeah, there's a chair and a lamp here in front of the door.
Your lighting is substantially better this week than it normally is. That's fair to say.
There's
like
lamp,
a halo effect coming around.
Yeah, right.
Good stuff. Where in the country are you, Ripley? That means, or has the wall been taken down? Is this just what's behind the wall?
Yes,
you forgot to put up the sheet.
Behind my wall is the great state of Maine. That's exactly how this alternate reality works. No, I'm on the East Coast this week, just resting a bit in our final stint before we get into Geneva watch days, and then the busy back half of the year.
Cool, good stuff. David, how are you this morning?
Very well. There might be some noise in the background because they're cutting down trees. So if you hear the bark of an electric or like a gas-powered chainsaw, that's what it is. But hopefully it's... I've shut all the windows, so I'm just being casseroled in here, but that's okay.
Good stuff. And good morning, Ariel. Are you well?
Yeah, I'm feeling pumped. I'm good. I'm going to be going to do more adventures with Citizen, celebrating the ProMaster soon in Canada. So I'm feeling great after my 9-hour desert march through Disney. So I think I'll do well. I think I'll do well with Citizen. There was a interesting watch that they have. It's called the ProMaster Land CQ. It's the first time that I've seen they use for the analog digi, but the subdials are e-ink. Mm-hmm. So now on the subdials, we'll be able to have a lot more information, but it's also sort of low power. And for years, like I think Ripley did the last review, the Skyhawks, these complicated pilot's watches that again have electronics technology, which is impressive, but very much last generation, maybe 2 generations ago. So seeing them advance with those, those analog digital tool watches that I think we inherently love, but I don't think anyone in the aBlogtoWatch team has ever been that excited about using one because they're like finicky and hard to master. I'm definitely curious about that, but it won't be ready. So I'll just have to enjoy the scenery.
Well, has anyone been further enjoying the scenery on the Olympics? Ariel was sent in a very tert response. No, there are Omegas on display. You can always contact the show, podcast at aBlogtoWatch.com. But and the guy who won the 100 meters won it wearing an Omega Dark Side of the Moon, which is a peculiar choice. I wonder to what extent they, having pounded down a track at less than 10 seconds, it lasted. It obviously survived. It wasn't all springs and cogs falling out at the end. I've also seen some Maurice Lacroix action on some of the gymnastics coaches, bizarrely, but lots of Omegas kicking about. Any sport or watch spotting particularly enjoyed this week? What random sport did you watch this week, Ripley?
Oh God, so many. So I guess women's field hockey, saw some of that. Mm-hmm. I don't know what the rapid fire target pistol thing where they wear the fancy glasses and they shoot like 5 in a row.
So that's 10 meter air pistol. Probably.
One of those. I don't know. I feel like I see probably a lot of Apple Watches more than anything.
Yeah.
And then kind of the odd one-off Omega here and there, but.
David, how are Hungary getting on the medals table?
Pretty good. We tend to do pretty well at the Olympics for some reason. So yeah, it's getting on okay. Not as spectacular as the last, I don't know, 3 or 4 Olympics, but it's still pretty strong. So I guess we'll make it.
Random sport watch this week?
0. Nothing.
0.
I have a 2-ton Cardiff Booker on my desk. How sporty is that?
That's right. Ariel, most random sport watched at the Olympics this week?
I haven't seen any in the last week. I don't have any of the channels that show the full thing, so I have to I haven't figured that out yet, and I've been busy, so I miss it. I want to. I have this anxiety that I'm missing it, and I don't know if I'll actually see anymore. So if any of you have hot clips and performances you want me to see, I'm happy to check it out. I'm embarrassed.
Ariel has FOMO. Oh, well. Okay, well, let's move on then. Grinding Gears. You've never paid... This is a great title. Well, this is a classic title from David. Grinding Gears. You've never paid this much to be this bored with luxury watches. Discuss. David.
Isn't that true, though? I wonder what everyone thinks.
Yeah, I've 100%. And is it actually true, or does it just feel like it's true? Do we just, as watch geeks, feel like we've seen everything before and it was better in the 90s or the noughties?
That's a deep philosophical question. Is it true what we feel to be true? That goes way past the scope of this article, Rick.
If a watch ticks and no one's listening, is it really ticking?
Yes.
So David, give us... I would encourage everyone to read this article because it's amazing, but just in case you haven't, give us the too long didn't read.
It's interesting because the reason why these articles tend to be so... Well, this is actually one of the shorter ones, but still, is because it's very difficult to give you a TLDR on these because there's a lot of fine print that has to be said, exceptions, examples, etc. But the premise here is basically the fact that I bring some solid examples as to just how intricate and beautifully engineered and detailed watches used to be, and also relatively speaking, of course, more competitively priced. And now you end up paying well over 10,000 or 10,000 US dollars or euros or whatever hard currency, and what you get is oftentimes extremely disappointing in a sense that and it's not like I come up with this on a Monday and then just fried it. It's been it's been brewing in me for years, and I wait a long time, and I double, triple, quadruple, 100 times check myself whether the trend that I'm seeing is actually correct. And once I settle on something that is telling me that yes, this appears to have been happening for many years, and I see this as a strong tendency in the world of watches, then I write about it. And that's how I think that it's more than just a feeling, but an actual and very important trend in the world of watches, I think.
Yes, my favourite quote from the comment section from, I have no idea how to pronounce this, it's Cutani Tempos or something, I don't know. Statistics are like bikinis. What they reveal is suggestive, but what they hide is essential. Yeah, it is.
It's a good one.
It's a cracking article. What watch, when you did your research, did you find and go, oh, I'd completely forgotten just how good that was in comparison to its current, if you like, generation version of it? Was there a watch in particularly that kicked off this article?
It's not that it kicked it off, because again, there have been so many countless examples, and I say this in the article. I think there could be a book about this, comparisons, of watches from major brands from 20 years ago to today. And this is not to disregard the developments in movements and material sciences and all the rest of it. A lot of progress has been made in those areas. But at the same time, if you look at this, and I found this collage from Omega, and this is their official picture from 2005, and it's basically 4 square pictures of the Omega de Ville chronograph Rattrapant from, again, 2005. And the caption I gave it is no stone left unturned, design complexity met refinement. in this Omega Deville from circa 2005. And if you look at it, if you look at the crown, the multi-tiered bezel, the lugs, the dial, the appliques, the date cutout, every single part of this watch, inside and out, is so beautifully engineered and so intricate. There's enough of it for three of today's watches, basically. And this is just such a prime example as to what these brands were doing.
And GLC came in for a bit of a mention. They are certainly a brand for me that just there's nothing wrong with what they do. The stuff's all great. It's all really well made. It's all now much more expensive than it was. But the flair of just slight Swiss craziness has just gone. Like Zenith, the Double-Matic, which I always go on about, just a bonkers watch, but amazing. And there's nothing that just gives you that same, I don't know, va-va-va-voom, as they would say in the car adverts. Ariel, is there a watch you remember or pine for a new version of it, rather than just watch brands going into their vintage catalogue and coming out with something actually quite plain?
Well, I'll answer by saying this. First of all, I definitely agree that for enthusiasts like us, this is a problem. So David is identifying a very real issue. It's not 100% of watches, but it's definitely enough watches for us to take notice. And then I asked myself, why is this happening? Because the watch industry doesn't want to make boring things. We know that they get excited about doing wild things. Every time that they feel like they can get away with it, when like someone's willing to pay for it, like they'll make crazy stuff. So the desire is there. I think the challenge is the fact that what the watch brands say, the words they make, not only to us, but to consumers, talk about how well they're doing, how innovative they are, how awesome everything is, and how they're just pushing the envelope, with every release. But what they're actually doing is playing it super safe. They are not investing in a lot of new stuff. They are cautious as hell, and they'd rather sell something old that works than try to experiment with new things, which are indicative of pretty serious issues. We've said time and time again that global demand for watches is really strong, but what watches people buy, how they buy them, what price points really, really can vary. So I think that these traditional brands have been struggling to make something new and generate demand for it such that the market buys it. They really struggle. It takes a couple of years, which is normal. But these corporate-minded brands, they can't handle that. They want watches that do well right away. And all of the stuff that excites me and David and you, Rick, and Ripley is the things that they have to think about that no one's really done yet. So what it takes to please us enthusiasts is, I guess I'll say, different than what many people in the industry feel that the market can bear, especially from the position of making watches.
But is it the case, though, that brands used to make crazy watches, like Swiss brands used to make what we would consider now a crazy watch, but that was actually competitively priced? Whereas nowadays, for a Swiss brand to make a crazy watch, they need to make it for $50,000 or $150,000. And the brand I would go to just now that would say, actually, they've made a crazy watch competitively priced that has done incredibly well for them and really given them brand kudos, is Christopher Ward with the Bel Canto. Now, I would say that the Bel Canto was the closest thing to the attitude that some of these older watches like this Omega Deville, it's not comparable in terms of mechanics and all the rest of it, but the attitude of the team that says, you know what, let's just do this and it'll sink or swim. And it turned out, it was going to be a limited edition. They sold a shed load of them because it actually gave the watch geek something geeky, like this Omega Deville or the Double-Matic or a GLC, thing that opens your Aston Martin. Who else is producing?
So
other
what
than
it
the
requires? So I think we all agree that
stuff?
Christopher Ward got lucky. That was not something that you could have predicted worked well. As you said, they originally were going to make very few. What it takes is a lot of brands saying, we feel confident about our performance such that we'll take a risk on something new and fresh. Christopher Ward, when they developed the Bel Canto, had that feeling. They're like, we feel good. We feel like we're doing well. We feel like we can have a blunder and it's not going to really like kill the company. you don't have that mentality with a lot of managers, especially since you know that they're judged on a quarterly basis. And a failure, even though if it ends up being good product and makes the brand look good, is ultimately bad for their career, right?
Yeah.
So you look at these systemic failures in the incentives behind how a lot of these creative luxury brands are run. And we're not the only ones talking about this. Other professionals in the space have been, but call it the machinery of the luxury brands and how it operates is against making enough of the stuff that we like. And then those end up doing it are the independents who feel like they have less to lose, but accordingly less resources to invest in truly original things.
Ripley, your takeaway on this?
I mean, to a certain degree, I think it's the manufacturers not wanting to, it could, like Ariel said, it's easier to sell something that they have, something old, and just kind of repackage it. But we also have to look at sort of what's been popular. There's been a big emphasis on, vintage inspired designs. And so, not every consumer, but a huge segment hasn't been, requesting that brands actually innovate or do something all that different. It's harder, and if the X amount of people just want a three-handed vintage inspired dive watch, then we'll give them a longer power reserve and call it a day. So I think things will be changing, but whether or not that can cost a reasonable price point is, I think, kind of the crux of David's article, because it's not like we don't see it now, but it's 5-6 figures minimum.
But David, is the key thing in your article about not being bored? Because I think you could put an argument that the Bel Canto is not boring. I think you could also put an argument that the original concept behind the Moon Swatch was, here's something really left field that's not boring. Now it's boring. After 23 generations of the same thing, it's boring. But originally it was a brand taking a swing and being prepared to miss. And is Ariel right? The corporate structure of these big Swiss conglomerates, where there's not one guy going, yes, this is what we're doing, like you could argue there is at someone like Christopher Ward and Mike France, is they don't have executives prepared to take a swing and also prepared to take a miss at that swing.
I think it's the article was more about the top 30 brands. I think I listed top 20 or something like that. So that's the focus is on them. Because I think in a way they have the resources, they dictate the trends, they set the tone for the industry in some ways, and then again they don't in some others, because they have given all this space for all these smaller brands and new freshly established brands to thrive in, which is great. It's fantastic. It's but this is not really a guide or anything like that, or a message to smaller brands, but rather to the powers that be in the watch industry.
Where David has such an excellent point, I think, is that the brands could choose right now to do more of this stuff. There's nothing holding them back. They're not like, oh, but we can't get it made. They could do this stuff. They still have the industrial capacity and abilities to make a lot of this stuff at these low prices. They're just not doing it. So it's not like lamenting. It's like, remember how cars used to be? That's not what this is. Like, they're just making the choice to not do it. And that might be good for business. It might be bad for business, but we lament the fact that they're just choosing to do something which in a lot of ways alienates them to the type of enthusiasm they need from us. And then they get confused, and then they try to hire influencers, and that goes sour, and then we're back to square one.
So,
Exactly.
David, when do you expect Nick's not to be bored?
Actually, not that far into the future. I think it's 3 to 5 years.
David's going to be bored for the next 3 years.
Yes, I have accepted my fate in that regard. But I do believe that this is, of course, everything is, what you've seen, you will see again in terms of trends and whatnot. And I do believe, if you look at all the reshuffles just very recently at the leading positions at major brands, at major groups like LVMH and Richemont, and probably, Swatch is a different matter. But still, if you look at that, you keep doing that because something is just not clicking. And of course, there are a lot of political reasons and other reasons for those reshufflings. But at the same time, I feel like these will add up to a situation in the aforementioned 3 to 5 years. But brands will have to realize the courses that they have set themselves, where 20 years from now we will be celebrating the 20th anniversary of the 50th anniversary watch, which is just not that great. So sometimes you have to like create something new, and the moment somebody tips the first domino over from one of these and people will flock to that, I think that will happen. But at the end of the article, I also say, and I think this is sort of important because, just to put it a little bit on us, the consumers as well, is to say that for this trend to change, not only brands but also customers will have to grow the courage to rock modern, interesting, and outlandish watches that lack the skin-deep mascara of full historical justification. And while people are just scooping all that up and are looking for nonsense like this Polaris that is in this article, for example, it's just so bad on so many different levels. And people are like, oh, but it looks vaguely like something that. If you can't let that go, and you don't have the courage to wear something that is fresh and is not justified through history and vintage whatever, brands will just keep on doing what they've been doing for the last few years. So we have to push them over a little bit on this edge as well.
Mm. So we should all be going into our ADs and saying, what, give us a... I'm not buying anything because there's nothing crazy enough in here. What brand, who do you expect? So 3 to 5 years, you're walking up to the PAL Expo, to all the major brands in there, and you've heard rumours that there's something incredibly exciting and not boring. Who do you think, what stand do you think you're walking up to see this watch that ends your 3 to 5 year drought of watch boredom?
I really, really want it to be Jaeger, to be honest. Yeah. I have so love for that to happen.
Yeah. Ripley, you're walking into PAL Expo. Where do you think you're having to go to be no longer bored?
Where would I like to see it, or like where?
Yeah. Well, I don't know. Who do you think's most likely to break the duck?
Oh, most likely. Okay, well, I would love for Panerai to do something that wasn't the Luminor or the Radiomir. Or the submersible. I mean, nothing wrong with them, but yeah, that would
Have they ever done anything that wasn't a Radiomir, a Luminor, or a submersible? I'm not like
the Mare Nostrum, that weird like blocky. Yeah, that blocky chrono. It was a LE based on some old thing they did long ago. Yeah, so.
That's made up.
There's that one.
I hate to break into your Ripley live, but that's most of that is just not really a thing,
No, it's yeah. Panerai barely recognizes it. No, I don't know. I think Hublot's always going to make their big bangs, but I think. We've seen some other more outlandish stuff from the MP line, so I'd love for them to keep kind of pushing that boundary and maybe not make it, $1 million.
Ariel, same question for you.
I was also thinking about Hublot because they are the type of brand that could have a totally new creative come in and do crazy stuff and wow people. They did a really big thing with the Big Bang. It really was a Big Bang. I think few people really remember it because it was 20 years ago now. Also, I think Baume & Mercier, I know that's a really long shot, but they've got good production access. They have a brand that could do a whole lot of stuff. And I think they could be sort of like a baby Cartier in the sense that it's like a gentleman's sports watch that really sort of leverages sort of a classic turn of the 20th century, still sort of very decorative vibe to it, but wouldn't necessarily have to be at Cartier prices. It could be like, if the Tudor to Rolex, Baume & Mercier could be that to Cartier, right? I think that would be something
here first.
Cool. What's that?
Baume & Mercier for the win. There we go.
We'll have to smuggle in some illegal substances into their Nespresso, though. It has to be like an Ocean's 11 sort of thing. But we don't take stuff out. We bring stuff in. I will just hang in from the ceiling and just inject like.
You want to just give them magic mushrooms,
psychedelics.
like
Yeah, into their Nespresso capsules.
Put it in the air they're breathing. Just have them be microdosing.
Yeah, they're breathing.
Microdosing on the Nespresso. Very good, very good. Good stuff. Well, someone's been probably more than microdosing, but we'll let Ariel tell us all about it. The Blingy Apple Watch Ultra Case review, Golden Concept Racing Sport Edition, RST. Are they ones or I's?
I don't
RST
know.
III 49 III 49 Amber Rose with, I don't even know what that word is.
Moissanites.
Moissanites.
Moissanite.
It sounds like some sort of New York. You got your moissanites?
It's really it's a term used, yes, in certain parts of New York regularly.
Is that right? I thought it would just be fun to look at this because it's becoming a real industry, just trying to make your Apple Watch blingy enough to make it acceptable that you don't need to buy the Richard Mille. Okay, that's maybe it's a bit of a stretch, but you don't need to buy the something else. That's the Boss watch or the Diesel that's got this. So, Ariel, tell us why. Why? First of all, did you think it was a good idea to review this?
Ever since the Apple Watch came out, I had predicted that this industry would come around to create aftermarket cases and straps to cosmetically enhance it. And it did. The problem is that a lot of them didn't make the Apple Watch look any better. They were just sort of there to add protection or whatnot, similar to maybe like an iPhone case. And I totally understand that. The proliferation of the Apple Watch means that there's sort of like a built-in need for distinctiveness. You want to have that functionality, but you don't want yours to look the same. I think the Apple Watch Ultra, the titanium one that has a couple of little added elements to it and slightly looks different, it does well for that reason, that it looks a little bit less generic. And so what interests me in this is this combination of Blingy, I have something weird you don't, with, and I also have the same tool that you have. That's sort of this interesting intersection where a case like this comes in. What's interesting about it is I found that it was not really meant to be a full-time case. So it was like, you're going to go out one night and then decide to yourself, I'm going to go ahead and put my Apple Watch in this case to show off a little bit. And it does that well. You get all the functionality plus, what I would say is a youthfully inspired modern luxury style. This one it's like more than double the price of others because of the moissanites, which is sort of this synthetic diamond-like stone that's harder than mineral glass, not quite diamond. But I think this was $3,000. These types of cases started about $1,000. It's expensive and it's not quite as comfortable as just wearing the Apple Watch on the strap. But I think that it's natural that as smartwatches become things we don't want to take off, then there's going to be a further development of the industry that allows them to be more interesting. And what's really surprised me actually is how few people out there have swapped up their Apple Watch strap for something interesting. The amount of like just black, Apple's Watch sport bands or whatever they're called out there, like insanely confuses me because you'd think that people want to be less boring about it. Anyways, that's the deal with it.
So, David, does this scratch the itch of less boring? Is this your ultimate nightmare, that the watch world interprets less boring as producing $3,000 cases to put $700 watches in?
I don't see the threat of this ever happening by from a major Swiss watchmaker. So I don't think that that's a problem. I like blinged out stuff, so I'm entertained. I see the lady you're asking if I'm not entertained. Well, I am. So I dare not say otherwise.
David sitting like Caesar. Am I not entertained? Yeah, I mean, just to describe it for those that are not watching this on video or haven't seen the article, it basically makes your Apple Watch look, in theory, I suppose, like a bit of a blinged out Richard Mille. It's trying to do that kind of aesthetic with the rubber strap and the baguette diamond type thing. Admittedly, it's doing it for almost the price of a Richard Mille strap. But yeah, is this going to catch on, Ripley?
Probably not for the high end segment. But I could see this, once AliExpress or whatever gets a hold of it, and where someone could have a singular Apple Watch and then just have a bunch of different, cheap cases they could throw on it to give it different sort of looks, in the same way that, someone might have a little handful of NATOs that they switch out on their watch. For me, this is one of those things where, like, this is all well and good until Apple changes the case profile a little bit on the Apple Watch Ultra, and then you've just got like a very expensive paperweight at that point, So,
what do you think Apple think of this? Because they'll not have noticed that people are doing this aftermarket. Do you think it's in their interest for this to happen? Or, as you say, do you think they will just make ever so slight tweaks that then suddenly the watch, which doesn't appear to be a new generation, doesn't actually fit? Because they've changed the curve slightly.
I think that's inevitable. Look at the phones, which I think are far less constrained by ergonomics. It's just like, think about every minute difference in iPhone changes. Oh, we've done this camera's a bit bigger. Oh, this one's here. This one's going to be wider, fraction of a millimeter here. So I'm sure they're going to at some point change the outer body to either make it better, make it more ergonomic, or do something for their own internal initiatives. But, for the person who is entirely price insensitive and just wants a fun way to like bling out their Apple Watch, why not? Why not do this? This is no one's buying this instead of a $3,000 watch. Let's put it that way, So this is the person who buys this in addition to a $50,000 watch.
This is the takeaway. Ariel?
Apple, I think, is ambivalent. I mean, as we've mentioned, they have years and years of officially authorizing third-party accessory makers to make iPhone cases, and you have that little label made for iPhone, and they have a similar made for Apple Watch with certain third-party straps and cases. Look, I think all Apple wants you to do is keep buying their latest one. If you decorate it this way or that way, as long as you don't buy a competitor, they don't care. Clearly, they have enough awareness out there what their thing looks like. And these items don't really fundamentally change the shape of it. It's not like, oh my God, it looks like a Rolex. No, it still looks like something that can't be a Samsung. It can't be a Casio or a Tag. It still essentially looks like the Apple Watch in a lot of ways. So I think that they're ambivalent about it, and I think that they're used to it. And I think that, there's less sort of concern for them in terms of the confusion, because that's usually what the luxury brands are worried about. Like, oh, that I don't want people to confuse my product with that thing, and that's again something I think they're too mature to care about.
Okay, well, we are not too mature, so we are going to play Guess the Price of the Seiko. In this case, it's Guess the Price of the Grand Seiko.
For nearly 85 years, Marathon Watch has been a family-owned company specializing in an extensive array of precision instruments designed to measure time, temperature, and distance. Today, all Marathon watches are built with industry-leading standards at the company's own factory located in La Chaux-de-Fonds, Switzerland. Many people know Marathon as a long-standing supplier of timepieces to the Allied Armed Forces. Today, Marathon is the Allied Forces' only remaining official supplier of watches. Marathon is also proud to supply high-quality tools to law enforcement and rescue professionals whose jobs absolutely require reliability and value. Since 1941, Marathon has been producing timepieces to exacting standards for the military, and until recently, that was the only way to get a Marathon military spec timepiece. Today, Marathon welcomes watch lovers everywhere to get to know one of the best-kept secrets in performance horology. Marathon watches were worn by active-duty professionals in conflicts such as World War II, Operation Desert Storm, and Operation Enduring Freedom. Wearers appreciate the ultra-durable, ultra-functional, and ultra-precise nature of Marathon's mostly tritium gas tube illumination-equipped products. Most recently, Marathon proudly announced the launch of the new Jeep by Marathon collection, which includes 4 featured timepieces that honor the brand's rich history and honorable service supplying the Allied forces back to 1941. Discover the full collection of exciting enthusiast-grade Jeep watches, as well as the full collection of Marathon products at marathonwatch.com.
Haven't done this for a few weeks. Ripley swears to me that he actually wrote the article and already cannot remember what the price was. So, Ripley, before we play this, why don't you give us a quick rundown on the Grand Seiko SBGA 507 and SBGA 509? I don't know why no 508? It's like 2 watches. Do they just not like even numbers? Don't know. USA exclusive watches.
Yeah, I don't know. I've noticed that a lot with Seiko numbers. They won't do every number. They'll kind of skip over them. But anyway, the Seiko, obviously, and Grand Seiko do a lot of watches. Back when Grand Seiko Corporation of America became its own company, they did some limited editions that were inspired by Kirazuri, which means sparkling painting in Japanese. So they got these shiny kind of dials. Now they're doing this sort of again. It's the 44 GS case. These ones are stainless steel. It's kind of wild that the movement they're using in these is now 20 years old, which is a bit impressive. But, it's still, spring drive is spring drive, but that is sort of an interesting milestone that the 9R65 is now 20 years old. So they've got a pink one and a blue one. This certainly isn't a new case. This certainly isn't a new movement. Even the inspiration of the dials, is something we've seen before. Obviously, there's the sparkling painting thing, but this is Grand Seiko, so we also get a Japanese nature tie-in. The blue one, so they both pay tribute to the transitioning sky over Lake Suwa in the region where the brand produces its spring drive movements. But the blue one, the SBGA 507, is intended to represent the evening sky with its dark blue hues. And then the pink one, SBGA 509, is inspired by sunrise. So, it's a... Yeah.
I mean, how can that be possible? Because in the evening and in the morning at the same number of hours above sunrise and before sunset, surely the sky looks exactly the same. Like when the sun comes up in the morning and it's just above the horizon, it looks the same as the sun going down at night at the same point in the horizon. It doesn't go from blue to pink.
The watches need a story, Rick. They have to have one. They can't be released otherwise.
Have to have a story. Right, okay, so I need to get with the program here. Ripley, I think that your wall is like Samson's hair. Because the wall is no longer there, the enthusiasm has just drained from you. You just can't.
So it's so hard to find something relevant new to say about these. So look, it's the 44 GS case. This is so familiar at this point. I mean, even the dial layout, we've seen this. We've seen so much of this before in minute changes. Are these pretty? Absolutely. But if you liked any of the countless other iterations of these that they did before, and you like blue or pink, you'll probably like these. They're limited to 300 pieces each, U.S. exclusives, as the name of them suggests. Consequently, if you're a big fan of the sky around Lake Suwa, you'll probably like these as well. But, they look to be good looking dials. I don't think they're particularly intricate, but, you know what? Yeah. I struggle to think of anything really good or really bad to say about. They're so non-objectionable,
There is, Is it not a bit odd to make a US exclusive watch and then try to relate it to something purely Japanese? Should they not have said this is actually what the sunshine looks like, as you say, somewhere in the States? Would that not make more sense?
Yeah,
no?
Yeah. Or I mean, like at this point, you could just
have no words.
We made something
words have
pretty
been used
for America, and it's kind of in like blue and pink, reddish, whatever. Like we'd be down for it. It doesn't need to be tied in. But no, I mean, they're good looking watches. And I think that's kind of the problem with all of these. They're all good looking watches. You probably, get the one you like. But at this point, back to the thing about not really pushing the boundaries. They're using a 20-year-old movement in a case that's been around for decades, and then these are stainless steel. So it's not even like we get some weird titanium processing or something.
Yeah.
I like
David,
them though.
I
They're
suspect
pretty.
this is... They're very nice. I suspect this probably is... we could tie this back into your original article about watches and being bored.
We could, but not in the way you're thinking. I think it's I put in this image of three. I think they were Aquaterras, and the caption is that, for the record, there is a solid case and demand for well-made and thought-out base designs, and this is somewhere beyond that. So I think this is past that. This is a little bit more out there. I like the dial texture. I like the colors. It's a little bit overwhelming at this point. I think it's becoming a matter of choice paralysis with Grand Seiko at some point, because you like this, but maybe you will like the one they launch next week a little bit more. So at one point, do you pull the trigger on a Grand Seiko at this point? It's like you're always teased with the next greatest, most inspired thing. So at some point, I feel like if I wanted a Grand Seiko, and I've actually been in this situation for like the last 2 or 3 years, I never got actually deeply excited by them, because I always keep myself reserved for the next one to see maybe I like that even a tiny little bit more than this. So that's my take on this.
Ariel, before we guess the price, is there any evidence that suggests that the inspiration for watches of like this comes first, rather than we've made this pretty thing, now we need to search around the countryside and find something that it looks like? How is the department structured?
There's
watch
no
design
evidence
at Grand
that
Seiko?
the story came before the watch here. There's none.
There's no evidence of actual inspiration.
No. And I realize Seiko frequently is inspired by like human-made things, like Japanese art and culture. But like Grand Seiko, are they not allowed, except for that one Godzilla time, to like ever think about something which isn't nature?
That's an excellent point. That's hilarious.
It's a mountain, it's a sky, it's a stream, it's the ocean, it's a tree, it's a fish. Like, why not all the amazing stuff from Japan's, 1,000+ years of history? Like, there's a bunch of high-end stuff. Let's, that's what I want to see a little bit more of, like, recognizable. I think that's the issue. All of us are like, my brain doesn't recognize any of the things in your poems, Grand Seiko. Make it look like something I've ever seen before. At least what that the rare occasions they actually show. You remember with the Genbi Valley, they had like that picture of the water. Like, what is this background? This is like a photo. This is like a Photoshop design. This isn't like the sky.
It's not real.
Yeah, like I like how they started with remember the regular Seiko, they started making up colors. So like, oh, they're like cocktail drinks. They just started getting silly with what the colors were. It just started in the factory. They're like, that's a nice shade of blue. Okay. Like, that's how this all starts.
Right. Well, what we're going to do is Alon has turned up. So we're actually going to let Alon in right now, completely blind, telling him nothing, and he can play Guess the Price of the Seiko too. So let's welcome Alon in. Good morning, Alon. You're live on a aBlogtoWatch Weekly Live. We are
Good morning.
Just about to play Guess the Price of the Grand Seiko. We have already discussed the watch, so you're going to see this completely blind. All you're going to see is a picture, and you're going to have to play Guess the Price also. So here is the watch, just for Alon's benefit, the Grand Seiko SPGA 507 and 509. Okay, Ripley, for this watch, what price do you think it was? You wrote the article, but swear to me, you promise me that you can't remember. So
No, because I remember it being pretty much what they've been charging for all of the other versions of this, which I'm trying to recall what one was the titanium. I think this was like 65 or 67, 6,700.
6,700 from
65.
Ripley.
67 sounds too
65. David, higher or lower? And are they the same price?
Yes.
Are they charging more for pink than they are for blue?
No, it's not precious pink ink or anything. Pink and blue, same price. 300 pieces of each.
David?
I was going to go with 8.5, but then I remembered that, and also Ripley mentioned it, but I also remember that these usually are relatively competitively priced for what they are, So I think maybe 8.5 is even a little bit higher. But my first instinctive guess was 8,500, given that it's a special edition and it's spring drive.
Ariel?
Steel, is that the case material?
Yeah,
Yep.
steel.
What's the diameter?
Like 41, is it?
This is that. So nothing has changed about this, but the price definitely has. I'm going to go way higher. I'm going to say 10,000.
10,000 from Ariel. That's what we like. Right, Alon, these aren't available in anywhere other than the States, so you're going to have to pay to import it. So how much are you going to have to pay?
So base US without taxes, 9,000. Same price for both dials.
Same price for both dials. And the price is, as we scroll to the bottom of the article, the price is, drum roll, 5,600 USD.
Wow, that's wrong. That's
totally
really
not predictable.
56.
Like how it's
$5,600.
It's even a little less than I thought.
Yeah.
I like how
even
the spring drive and the quartz prices are now basically the same.
How does that even? Doesn't make any sense.
You know what? Finally, they've amortized the cost out of development. It only took them all this time.
30 years, yeah.
Or we accepted the high price increases by other brands. But before we continue, I'm in shock. I don't see the stone wall. Ripley, where are you?
I'm in Maine. So the wall is...
Maine?
I didn't bring the wall. That would have been a...
You didn't bring his export.
It would have been far heavier than the weight allotment I'm allowed for my carry-on.
I think we do need to buy you like a cloth version. A screen print that you can just fold up in a silk handkerchief and hang from wherever you are. We do have a relevant haiku: silent sapphire skies, steel elegance, time's soft sweep, Grand Seiko's pure grace. It turns out the haikus are becoming all identical as well for each of the iterations of this watch. It's just the same haiku. Even ChatGPT can't deal with it.
You don't have enough words in haikus, so when you release so many watches, you're limited.
Hi, I'm Ariel Adams from aBlogtoWatch. I'd like to tell you about Bezel, the modern app for buying and selling authenticated high-end watches. Bezel isn't like other platforms. Bezel was designed exclusively for today's timepiece collectors and enthusiasts, offering choice, convenience, safety, and service. In addition to personally authenticating each timepiece sold on the marketplace, Bezel also offers a personal concierge service to walk you through any part of the watch buying or selecting process. Want something not currently listed on Bezel? Their concierge service is happy to seek one out for you. Buying and selling a watch can be scary as well as challenging, especially with all the options out there today. Bezel uses a modern, intuitive interface to deliver a class-leading technology experience that makes it simple and fun to search through available watches or list one you currently want to sell. Try Bezel today and discover what others like you are already excited about. Get the Bezel app or use the getbezel.com website. That's GETBEZEL.com. Thanks.
Let's move on, and we will do a review of these before we play a Hit Miss Maybe. This is Christopher Ward C60 Trident Pro 300 GMT watches. I like a good GMT. Ariel's normally a bit kind of GMT, but what do you think of this, Ariel? Some sunny sunshine colors from Christopher Ward.
I saw these in person. They're very friendly looking. Yes, it's just another GMT. I guess here's what kind of bothers me, and I know that I'm not going to win this argument because Rolex has a GMT watch that looks almost identical to their non-GMT watch, but I just don't want any more GMT watches. They're like, is that a GMT or is that not a GMT? I just want them to look there. Chronograph, you never look at there. Like, is that a chronograph? But the GMTs are like, is that the exact same version of the watch without the GMT? And so I think the new laziness now in the industry is just, let's just add a GMT complication to that thing we already did, and then call it a new name, charge differently for it, maybe like try to pretend it's different by putting another strap on it or bezel. But I think that's kind of annoying me right now. It's like, okay, I get GMT watches are popular, especially with Miyota and Le Jeu Perret, which same company. There's new, less expensive GMT movements available, which really opens it up for a lot more people. Let's experiment with design. Do they have to all look exactly the same? I mean, if there's any watch really looks all the same, honestly, it's GMT watches.
Ripley, bored already?
I mean, like, I think it's a good looking watch, but I sort of agree with Ariel that you know, the reason Rolex has two watches that look the same with different, you know, one's a GMT and one's a diver is because that brand, if you really want to pare it back, makes like 4 total watches that kind of get spread around into these different collections. I personally kind of like what Omega does here, where they've got like the Planet Ocean collection, and there's among them is a Planet Ocean GMT, but they don't try to call the Planet Ocean GMT this other, you know, thing. So I kind of wish that other brands, especially if they had a large enough catalog, not like Rolex, sort of followed a similar approach where, you know, in the same way that you can get a blue one or a mid-size version or whatever, you can get a GMT equipped version. But, you know, if really the differences are a fourth hand, a movement, and a bezel, in my opinion, it's effectively the same watch.
David, what do you think of these in particular from Christopher Ward?
Not really a fan. I think they're kind of messy looking, so I'm not really a fan of these. They also, a lot of them look like a Zalos or your generic fancy looking whatever it is, micro brand stuff. So I don't really look at these as like a full on Christopher Ward watch. I think you could get these with any other logo on them from any number of other brands. So I'm not really a fan of these at all.
You mean is it Chris by Christopher Ward?
Chris Ward, yeah, exactly.
Is
That's
it
hilarious.
are Christopher Ward in that kind of slightly dangerous position now? Are they entering the difficult second album phase? I mean, I suppose it could be argued they've been around long enough, but is it starting just to become slightly generic? I mean, they're obviously a mass retailer. They've got a fairly unique model of how they get word about there. But are there some?
But they're leaning into
dangers?
You're right, but they're leaning into it. Who are they actually trying to appeal to? That enthusiast crowd that wants the micro brands, the little ones, right? They're like, we were that a long time ago, sort of, but not really. But we have similar price watches that are, you know, in a lot of ways more refined and in a lot of ways a better value. So I think they're actually competing in a good space right now because they're like not a micro brand, which is competing for business. And they actually offer a lot for the money when looking at those things and a design that isn't entirely out of range. So I totally agree with you, but they're not trying to compete with the brands that what you're saying would create the danger.
But is there a danger that they go along to the Worn and Wound? You know, every small watch event I can think of in the UK, for example, and many in the States, there will be loads of genuine micro brands, and there'll be Christopher Ward. Is there a danger that actually, if they don't change the story, then eventually the story will catch up with them? You're no longer a micro brand, so stop coming to these events whereby you're competing against the little guy, you know, Studio Underdog or Fears. Again, two brands you could also argue are rapidly not becoming micro brands, and you need to take the step up and go to Geneva and, you know, show properly and
so the real difference between a brand at Watches and Wonders and something like, you know, even actually a lot of the time to watches or wind up is that you can go and you can speak to the owner or the creator directly at one of the smaller brands, whereas it's sort of a, you know, you might be speaking to someone who's just hired for the show at a Watches and Wonders. And I think that's what a lot of customers like right now, this idea that you can buy from the artist, so to say. And as long as Christopher Ward has a charismatic representative like Mike Pearson, or I don't know who they have in the UK, going
Mike
out there
France,
and able,
he does it.
and able to have a similar conversation as you would to a entrepreneur or founder run brand, they'll be able to do it. It's when the person at the show is just like, yep, here's the stuff, guess you read about it online, and yeah, like once that happens, they will lose it. But as long as they can maintain having this charismatic individual that like wants to share, that wants to talk, both of the mics are like that, then they can sustain it.
So as long as just keep employing people called Mike, they'll be fine. Alan, you're in Europe, which isn't a surprise to you, I'm sure. But how is Christopher Ward viewed over there?
So I've been actually thinking while listening to you guys. It's very interesting. So I believe Christopher Ward's proposition was always direct to consumer, be the underdog, a lot of value for your money, copy the big boys. I don't think they even intended on being in the microsphere of the watchmakers. They always had the ambition to do volume, and that's how I perceive it. I think that in Europe or in the Netherlands or outside the UK, because they were world famous in the UK, every in-flight magazine you'll see Christopher Ward and Ferrer, and Bremont. But I think what put them on the map is the bel canto with the collectors. That suddenly put them on the radar. And the 12 with mainstream watch aficionados that maybe would buy a PRX, suddenly the 12 came on their radar. So not so much the ones that like the Antarctique by Chapek, but the PRX crowds. Now, regarding the fairs, it's very interesting. It's a direct-to-consumer brand, and they have zero ambition to go into retail. So you're always forced to buy online, and the collectors here in mainland Europe, they want to see it in store to feel the product. So they're not at the micro brand fairs here. So that's the look and feel of the brand here in Europe.
Right, and what do you think of this particular release?
So what I wanted to say, or actually as feedback to Ariel's feedback, is I don't know if it's a second album. I think they're shedding their old skin, which is doing cover band music, and they're trying to find their own sound with the bel canto, no pun intended, and the 12. So it seems they're coming into their own as a brand with its own design identity or brand DNA. And this, for me, is again 12 in a dozen. And to zoom in specifically, I always get confused when they do one model that has like an aluminium bezel, a ceramic bezel, a sapphire bezel, whatever. And then it's a metal relief bezel. So take a Seamaster that has the ceramic in the neckton. I find that a bit confusing because if you want that dial color with another bezel, consumers always get confused. I kind of like the greenish summery fashion vibes, but I don't like the yellow. I did see once you guys were scrolling through the images, it was interesting. They offer two kinds of metal bracelets on one model. And that a lot of brands don't do. And that I find interesting. So the 5 link is not appealing to me. The 3 link is maybe too much oystery. Look what I'm wearing today. But if they really give the consumers the option to opt between two kinds of metal bracelets for one model, then I salute them because I don't know any big brand that does that.
So would you buy one $1,500? Would it ever be on a list?
My money will go to a 12 if I had to spend CW money for that amount.
Good stuff. Right, well, maybe we should just play hit miss maybe on this very quickly, seeing as it's here and seeing as we're all here. So overall with that, was this a hit, a miss, or a maybe? 1, 2, 3, go. Yeah, hit, maybes, miss. I think it's a hit. I think by the time you look at it, look at the price, the quality of it, when you actually have them on. It's difficult to beat.
So,
But,
Rick, you would strap off your Panerai and strap this on.
Oh no. Now hold on a second. Let's not get entirely carried away. I mean, yeah, these are very nice watches. I had one for a wee while from Christopher Ward back when they first released the GMT. It's an incredibly comfy watch. It was even more reminiscent of the Rolex Explorer, and it was just a happy watch. It just, yeah, it made you want to look at the time. And I always think, I was like, if you ever find yourself just taking a moment, observing not just the time but the watch, when you look at the time, then I think it's done what it needs to do, which is it's gone beyond just being a simple tool to give you some information about the time of day. And I found wearing it that you looked at and you go, yeah, that's actually quite nice, in the kind of 10th of a second that it takes to tell the time. So there we go. Right, well, let's play full on hit miss maybe, and let's start with this. We've now had a hands-on review of the NORQAIN Wild One skeleton. Mr. Adams, what did you think of this?
So I've been a fan of the Wild Ones, part of the Independence collections, but what's called the Wild One, since it came out. Such an interesting story with the involvement of Jean-Claude Biver and the way it's constructed. It's sort of like, to me, if you took a G-Shock and a sort of old generation Big Bang and combined them. They had this promising thing where the dials were all going to be different because they could 3D, print them, and they'd be kind of wild. They never quite got the standard dials right yet, but I think they will. And then they came out with this skeletonized version, which kind of feels like just because it's like, well, people like skeleton dials. The colors are really, they pop because it's rubber, and you can color rubber in these vivid, beautiful, lush colors. There's this sort of corally orange, or sort of a reddish orange, and this bright leafy green that are really, really fun. You have this combination, like I said, of this sort of summery, casual, vibe with this sort of like open dial. It's the Sellita automatic movement. It is a fun watch. It's not perfect by any means, but it's lightweight, it's comfortable, it is durable, doesn't need to be skeletonized. But if you wanted an interesting, colorful sports watch, you could go way, way worse.
Okay, so let's do it. Is it a hit? Is it a miss? Or a maybe? 1, 2, 3, go. Hit, miss, hit, couple of maybes. Oh, Ripley's even using graphics. How clever of you.
I don't know how I did that, but
it was the power of thought. That's it. So I surprised myself in giving this a hit because I think collectively we've given NORQAIN a bit of a kicking recently, and I think probably they've deserved it. But this is pretty cool. The skeletonizing is all right. It's not the best, but it's not like it's a particularly beautiful movement. But it's not ugly in terms of kind of open heart movements can sometimes look. The price, 5-ish grand, maybe a bit on the steep side, but not horribly steep for what it is. But Ripley, you gave it a what?
I said it was a miss. So I like the Wild Ones. I think the colors, I think that like bright orange is great. I don't like the Wild One skeletons because they don't use the Kinesi movement and they're even more expensive. So I feel like the justification for the regular Wild Ones is, well, they're using the Kinesi movement. You're kind of looking at Tudor prices anyway for anything with that caliber, whatever. But when they're basically giving me a skeletonized like SW200 in the Wild One case for like almost $6,000, that's where it just it doesn't feel like a complete watch. It feels like they wanted to make a skeleton one. They couldn't make a skeletonized version of the Kinesi movement. And they said, well, what movement can we make that's a skeleton that will fit? Okay, well, let's do it so we can release it this year. And so it's like there's a lot of potential here. Love the color even. I like the regular ones, but it just feels just too expensive. And it almost just feels like this wasn't the movement they wanted to have in it from the get-go.
This isn't the movement you're looking for, Ariel. How'd you vote?
So I said it was a hit because I think it's just fun to wear. I totally agree that the Kanisi movement is the better option here. I already said that the skeletonization is somewhat arbitrary. It's fun, but it's somewhat arbitrary. And I would happily skip that for a dial. I'm interested in what the perfect dial for this case would be. I think that one of the things that sells you on this watch is how comfortable it is. Like it's lightweight, it wraps around the wrist nicely. So I think in a lot of ways they got the ergonomics correct. And that's the hallmark of a watch you want it to be better because you like to wear it. So you want it to be perfect. So the only things that I think that I'd like to see more improvement on is the sportiness of the dial. But really the case and all that, that's like the hardest thing to do. I mean, I'm sure you guys agree. There's watches all the time that come out, you're like, basically the dial and hands need to be tweaked a little bit, but arguably that's easiest. You got the movement, you got the case, you got the bracelet. That happens a lot. And I'm still hooked on the bright color thing. I don't need to spend crazy amounts of money on it, but like I still don't gleefully wear just like a watch with a black dial and a black strap. Like for me right now, like I'm just not picking that up very often.
Alon, would you pick this up if it was in your collection?
So I actually like the wild ones very much. If we use the same analogy maybe from Christopher Ward, the old NORQAINs are maybe 12 in a dozen, too much Breitling DNA. I think with the wild ones, they hit the niche. It is interesting indeed that apparently Jean-Claude Biver really helped him as a friend. He wasn't a consultant, he wasn't hired. They really jammed and they came up with this model, hence the Hublot vibes, but that's okay. So I'm with Ariel, very much fun. I don't think you need the skeleton. And indeed, if this was a Kinesi, I will still opt for the closed dialed version. And if I was jamming with them, I would maybe do ton sur ton, tone on tonal dials. So if you're running with the color schemes, run all the way with it. Maybe just let the color of the strap run through the dial. I don't know, but I think they're fun. I've held them. I've worn them for an hour during a meeting with NORQAIN. Very light, very comfortable, fun. If you want something different but qualitative, that's the way to go. So that's why I voted maybe on the skeleton.
David, you gave it a maybe as well, I think.
Yeah, the more I look at these, the more I like them, but you would never, ever see me pay $5,800 and wear a watch with such a movement. I just can't get over this movement. Honestly, I think it's quite bad in the way that it is finished. That's too much beaver for me. Sure, put in a movement that looks great. No, I think it's just. Maybe this movement belongs in a $2,000 watch tops, not 5,800. And if I'm paying 5,800, I want a bracelet or just something else. But I do like the colors, and I'm sure they actually look comfortable to wear. So that's a good thing. But the movement is just a big no-no. And I'm not sure they could skeletonize the Kennedy, whatever. But the fact that you can pay $1,500, almost $2,000, $1,500 less and get an NORQAIN with a Kennedy movement, and then pay $5,800 for these, it just doesn't make any sense. And I do like the name, Wild One. That's a great name.
Do we know if there's a reason you can't skeletonize a Kinesi movement? Is it particularly difficult or ugly? Are there any Kinesi movements that have been skeletonized?
It's just that Sellita provides that version. Sellita makes it.
Right,
It's just like a out of the box thing. Kinesi doesn't. So, NORQAIN would have to get the movement, either cut it up themselves, have someone do it. It becomes insanely expensive than just buying a ready-made something like that.
But it's interesting it doesn't exist yet. I think there would be strong demand for it, especially given the number of brands that Kennedy supplies. So maybe that will happen sooner or later.
Don't forget how Armin Strom started. All they did is take basically Edda movements and just like cut them up and decorate them and make them nice. Like that was Armin Strom for a long, long time. So there is a business to do that.
Good. Well, next up, from the mind of Ripley sellers, the Timex X. Okay, that already doesn't work. Timex X Ghostlight Navi watch, hands-on. Ripley, you reviewed this last week. I quite like the look of this, but what was it like hands-on?
It's cool. I think it's slight missed opportunity to not have the ghost glow, and it doesn't have Indiglow. But it's this is the second, I believe, collaboration model that Ghostly International, which is like a record label, which is kind of evolved past the record label as most do. It's more or less I mean, they put on shows and it's kind of pseudo lifestyle brand. They do a lot of merch and stuff. But this is their second model. It's got a world time bezel. You know, it's pretty understated, all things considered, given that, you know, it is a collaboration model with a record label. You know, nitpicks. I wish the case back wasn't a snap-on. And this is a really minor nitpick, but the bezel insert is a world time bezel and it's graduated to 24 hours. So you have to then kind of line up, you know, convert the time to the 24-hour time to then line up the bezel with the little track along the periphery of the numerals. It's a little bit fiddly to use as a world timer, but it's a pretty cool Timex. And let's be real, for the person who likes the Ghostly International and picked this watch up, the fact that it's a pretty neutral and versatile design means this is something that you could actually see someone wearing on a daily basis rather than something that just feels overtly like a piece of like gift shop merch.
It's $179, which I think is very important to consider.
Right. So like we're talking like significantly less than a moon watch here. So, you know, in the realm of horological fun, you know, all things need to be taken accordingly.
I wonder if Omega recognized that they were going to become, or Swatch, the standard with which other things were judged. It's either cheaper than a moon swatch or more expensive than a moon swatch as being the kind of gauge. It's like in this country, when the Amazon rainforest is burning, it's always referred to in units of Wales, as in the country Wales. It's 5 times the size of Wales, or whatever that's being burnt or being explored, or the size of an iceberg. I don't know if they considered that the moon swatch would become kind of currency in that standard. But is this Timex Ghost a hit, a miss, or a maybe? 1, 2, 3, go. Hit, miss. Ooh, a miss from Ariel. Interesting. I think the fact that I have no idea who Ghost International, or whatever they're called, are, I just think that this looks like it's got a cool ghost on it. And for that reason, it's a hit. If I'd known anything about the brand, I would probably give it a miss as a kind of, I don't want to wear a watch, especially one this cheap that's also co-branded. I've got a funny feeling that Ariel may have given this, I may know why Ariel's given this a miss, but we shall see. But Ripley, you gave it a hit. You sticking with that, having had the hands on?
Yeah, I mean, it's not a perfect watch, but at roughly half the price of the latest moon phase moon swatch, it's a pretty solid contender if you just want like a quartz, you know, fun piece. Again, if you like Ghostly International, it's got a number of little Easter eggs, like it says Ann Arbor instead of New York on the bezel. You know, this is literally a watch that someone could happily just wear as like a weekend piece. Low stakes. Yeah, I mean, it's so unobjectionable. You know what I mean? There's nothing really all that special to write home about it, but at the same time, that's kind of what you want in some watches, and I think this kind of strikes a nice balance of being super sort of run of the mill, but it has a few little Easter eggs that kind of set it apart. So it's solid.
Okay. Nothing objectionable, but I wonder, Ariel, if what you found objectionable was this. It's one of your watches with a logo on that, with a phrase on the back: everywhere, nowhere. Why did you give this a miss?
I didn't have a problem with that statement.
Okay.
I mean, look, the thing I like about this watch is actually not the design from is it a functional timepiece, but the aesthetic design. It's cool looking. It's decent looking. It's extremely inexpensive in the sense, not like I'm saying like, wow, it's a good deal. Like, it's a cheap watch, right? Like, it's a cheap watch with a fun design. None of us are into wearing cheap watches. We haven't been in a really, really long time. I'm glad that they're doing these collaborations. I'm glad that, you know, Timex is able to do this stuff. It's about as niche as it can go. But like, it's a very qualified miss in the sense that if someone else likes it, I wouldn't fault them for it. I'm not gonna be like, what the hell? But like, the bezel that makes no sense. It's fragile. The finishing on hands like that, it's just not that great. It's kind of polished. Like, I wouldn't want to wear it. the relation, I don't know the company. The Ghost is cool. Like I said, the design is the best part, but the cheapness of the watch and some of the like oddity of the mismatched parts don't make up for it. It's not pretty enough, and that's why it's a miss for me.
Okay, Alon.
I gave it a hit because I didn't know who Ghostly was either, or who they are. Initially, I'm like, okay, nice pilot watch, cool with a ghost on it. World timer, it looks like an IWC Pilot world timer. I'm happy they made it because Timex A is a watch company, and I think watch companies should make more watches and not all the fashion brands. I think this is cool for either youngsters that want something else than a moon swatch. There goes again the moon swatch, the benchmark. It's excellent to give as a gift, and or maybe if you have an IWC and you're traveling and you don't want to wear your IWC Pilot or whatever pilot watch you have, this is a good alternative. So for the money, I don't think you should think too long. Yeah, it is cheap. You're right, Ariel. The world time bezel has zero functionality. It's just fun. And if you don't want to wear sexy plexi watches, then at least you have a steel one. And I think Timex should make more of them. And a little side note, I think the NATO strap is nicely woven. You don't see that often. It looks like a 5-link.
It is.
I was quite impressed with the strap.
It is a very nicely done NATO, and the texture is only on the outside, so it remains pretty supple. Yeah, I think the big design miss is just the little you can't even see them, like the little 24-hour scale on the outside of the hour markers. If those were bigger, the bezel would be easier to use. But I say it in the review, if they just made it a more limited world time bezel that was calibrated to a 12-hour scale, we would have avoided all these problems. And
or they could have just made it a GMT like they apparently wanted.
But
just add a fourth hand.
But maybe we just have too many GMTs. I feel like this kind of makes sense for a record label. They've got people in all over, all different locations. I think both functionally and thematically it fits into the ghostly world. So I'll give them props on that, but it's like a B- execution of a world timer.
David, better than a B-?
No, I gave it a hit. I quite like this. For some reason, this gives me this strong, amazing garage find vibe. It's a time travel already 30 years into the future where you pull it out of a box and you're like, wow, this is cool. I will look into whatever ghostly is. And it's a Timex with a ghost on it and a weird bezel. I'm not even sure how that works with like 3 hands. It's a quirky little thing, and I really like it for that. It's just this garage find vibe that I'm getting that is very likable about it to me. Although this bezel really is, here it is. I find it aspirational, and I like that. It's a cheap watch, but they aspire to be a GMT. They're like, we'll put a word time bezel on it, and then you figure it out. And I find that very, very charming.
For the watch for the aspiring GMT manufacturer. Yes. When I grew up, I want to be a GMT watch.
Exactly.
Okay, well, maybe
someday I'll earn that second time zone. You'll see.
That one extra hand.
Oh dear. Right, next up and finally for this week, Ariel, you wrote the review on this. This is the Laco Hamburg DIN 8330 certified pilot watch. First up, what makes something certified when it comes to pilot watches? Who's certifying it?
Oh my god, I'm so I think I'm too tired to tell the whole story about this. It gets so deep, I don't even know it all. Basically, this DIN 8330 standard was created in conjunction with the watchmaker Zinn and the German sort of standard and measure part of the government, I believe. It was an evolution of an also modern standard called test staff, which apparently was for various types of pilot instruments. It wasn't specific enough for watches, and Zinn was like, we're confused, we don't know what to do. So what you have here is this modern, I think it came out in 2016 or so, standard. And what that means is it has to be a certain durability. It has to be a certain legibility. It has to operate in certain types of environments. It means it has to pass all these durability tests. It's basically saying it's a very specific tool, and we love stuff like that. So Laco made their first DIN 8330 certified watch that passes all these tests, and apparently it was a big pain to do all that. And they're the only second one after Zinn to do so. And Laco's considerably less expensive. I think it was 43 millimeter watch, good componentry, ceramic bezel, good sandblasted steel case. The movement obviously has to be regulated to be quite accurate. So in terms of like the classic things you want in a tool watch, this has a lot of it. It's a great execution of a traditional Flieger style pilot watch. There's really not a lot this watch does bad. It's obviously not the watch for everyone, but I found myself really, really liking this watch a lot, wearing it quite a bit. And that's, I think, the sign of a good timepiece. So for me, this was an impressive watch in terms of understanding what went into the DIN certification. But even if you didn't know anything about that, you're like, wow, there's no glare. It's really legible. I can see it in the bright sunlight. Like, you can just sort of notice that there's something good about it.
But how useful, though, is a watch for flying in that doesn't have a chronograph on it? I thought kind of the whole point of how you would use a watch for flying if all your instruments broke is you'd need something to accurately time. Or is the idea you just use the rotating bezel to?
I mean, it depends what you're doing. I mean, I think if you had a serious issue like that, you're going to pull out your phone and use that type of stopwatch thing. I'm not a pilot.
Hey Siri.
All we do is learn about all these strange complications and features like slide rule bezels that have been created for pilots over the years. I have no freaking clue what a pilot today would actually ever use, let alone with these military professional pilots that something like this is for. I'd like to know. I know that night vision was a big thing. You had to be able to see the dial if you're wearing this night vision overlay. And it has to, like, one of the interesting things on the test was it has to work for a very specific amount of time, 48 hours submerged in like oil that was be in the plane, like random things like that, which is like, oh, that's cool. So I have a lot of faith in this product. It will outlive me. That's what you want in a good watch.
Good stuff. Well, everybody, is it a hit? Is it a miss? Or is it a maybe? 1, 2, 3, go. Hit. Only David's giving it a maybe. It's just cool. I love the fact the anti-glare and the photos make it so obvious that it's anti-glare. Likewise, I have no idea how on earth you'd use this watch. What practical application it actually has beyond just being a talking point, Ripley?
It's cool. I had the chance to briefly handle this one when Ariel was wearing it. I mean, it's well made. It's not all that expensive when you. Like, I thought it would be more, and I feel like I don't say that all that often, with the exception of that Grand Seiko from earlier today. You handle it. You're like, oh well, this is kind of like Zinn helped them produce it. It feels like a kind of a high level Zinn, but it's not. It's a Laco, and it's just a hair over $2,000. I don't love the 430 date, but I think it's a very practical watch. And like Ariel said, I have a lot of faith in it. If one of the criteria is that it's like 48 hours submerged in oil, at this point I've drowned. I'm probably like partially decomposed or something at this point. It's 48 hours in oil. I don't know, but the watch is going to still work. So I think it looks to be a well-made thing. And then Tom, one of our contributors, is actually getting his commercial pilot's license, and I'd recently asked him what type of watch he would actually find useful, and he said honestly something actually really instantly legible, so not a digital display, because you're not using it for anything other than just having a good reference of time or elapsed time. So he said something like a Hamilton khaki, which he has. So this is pretty much kind of right in that spirit, uber legible. So I think it's a solid watch.
The date is actually at 4 o'clock.
Oh, you're right. 4 o'clock.
4:30.
And maybe that's why I like it. It looks proper. Yeah.
Yeah, there we go. Ariel.
I mean, I gave it a hit. I mean, I just waxed poetic about it. No,
Just checking.
Look, this reminds you, if you're a tool watch person, like if you're like, I'm a tool watch guy or gal or whatever, wear this watch. If you're not into it, you're not into tool watches. I'm sorry. This is the standard you're tested at. Again, I want there to be more watches like this. The thing is, which there's going to be other watches that could be DIN certified, right? This is a standard. The thing that I want to see is this is a modern standard, and I wrote this in the review. It came out in 2016. Let's see some modern pilot watches, right? This is just this nearly 100-year-old Flieger watch dial that does modern things. It would be like, we have these classic looking modern cars. It's the kind of same thing. There's no thought like, let's connect it with aviation of today. The instruments or the actual planes. Like, this is meant to go with modern planes, but it looks like something that still quite in the last century. I mean, look at that. That looks like a 747. I mean, that's, from the 70s or something like that. So that's really what I want to see, is to have another company, maybe it'll be Laco, maybe another one, is take this DIN 8330 standard, take it seriously, and then build a more futuristic product around it.
I'm just realizing that image of the plane on the back is so wrong in so many ways. those wheels are not connected. So there's wheels in the underbelly at the back, and there's two sets of wheels at the sides that don't appear to be connected to the plane. So I'm not sure where that.
Do you want a photo-realistic representation of a plane taking off? Is that what you're saying?
You would think that a pilot's watch should at least go to that extra effort to make sure the wheels are glued onto the plane somewhere.
Maybe it's a snapshot of something which is a horrible accident, just after it happened.
It's a reminder. It's there, but by the grace of God. Alon, what do you think of this?
Dismissing what you just said, looking at the watch, one German word comes to mind is Gründlichkeit.
Okay, is that a sweary word? That's all I need to know.
It's thoroughness. This is how Germans do. Thorough. This is quality. 90s vibe pilot watches like Indeed, Sin did them, Tutima, Laco. My advice, if you want a pilot's watch, either you can't afford an IWC or you're fed up with IWC, go for these German guys. Flieger Friday, this is the way to go. They could have done without the date. They could have done without that little DIN logo. But you know what? For 2K, awesome watch. It looks gründlich. And it looks thorough. And it's made as it's supposed to be made. So, yeah, it was a hit for me. I mean, I can discount a lot of things. They don't need them. But they show respect to collectors by doing the date disc in black. They could have gone with a standard white disc, but they didn't. And I regret that they wrote everything in English on the case back. Back in the day, they would have done German, but it shows their ambition that they want to grow. So this is a micro brand. I don't know, but they definitely should be at every micro brand fair. So hit for me.
I did give this a hit, but now that I'm noticing 1, 2, 3, 4 different fonts and the wheels in the wrong place on the back of the watch, I may need to change my mind. David, you did not give it a hit.
I did not. I think they could have made it prettier, but to get the effect that Alan you were describing, they just made it ugly. It's like, as though it's thorough, but it's just ugly, I think. I'm not really a fan of three-hand watches with 120 notches on them. It looks more technical than it actually is. It's not. I don't even know how these get certified. Like with all these notches and everything, like it's just, it doesn't look as technical and as tool watchy as I think it should be. On this basis, you could pilot watch certify 2/3 of Timex watches that have all the notches and three hands. I'm sure it's very durable. I like the way that it's the contrast is very cool, but it's just I feel like it's leaning very heavily into this certification thing while actually delivering very little in the way of it being a true pilot's watch. And the plane, actually, there is such a plane, Rick. It's an A340 that has the wheels like that. I mean, I understand that they.
I'm sorry, there's no plane that has the wheels that are attached to the back of the flaps of the wing.
That's true. Yeah, I see.
There
what you
might be
mean,
planes that have center-mounted wheels. I'm fairly sure those that do have center-mounted wheels, they are twin bogies and not like just two wheels at the back, because the plane would just fall over as soon as you landed. It would be like
It would
two
just crash
enormous
just immediately.
sets. That would just tip over if you landed it for all sorts of reasons. The outside wheels would be useless and the inside wheels wouldn't balance.
Alon,
So,
is there
yeah.
a German word for Rick's finickiness here?
One that's repeatable.
Ein Schweinhund. No, I'm kidding.
Good stuff. Right, well, that is us for Hit Miss Maybe this week, and that is our show for this week. If you can find us in lots of places. You can find us on the main aBlogtoWatch YouTube channel. You can tune in live around about 7:30 in the morning on a Tuesday UK time to watch the live recording of the show. And if you do, you might get a little preamble and a little post-match, which you don't get in the main recording. We now also have a different way of you contacting us. You can email us, podcast@ablogtowatch.com, but we have a WhatsApp number. So should you dare to want to leave us a review, send us a voice message, or just generally complain or send us rude German words, you can do it by texting +44 7386 69 0897. Yes, not the most glamorous of phone numbers, but we'll try and work on one that sounds nicer. But if you want to get in touch with the show, you can do
I,
it.
for one, want
+44.
to be on a call-in show. I would like people to call in.
Yeah,
not
yeah.
knowing
That
what
would
they're
be
gonna
amazing.
Talk about. That's
We
gonna be
have
great,
the tech, so if you would like to volunteer for a call-in show, then we can do that sometime later in the year. But so get in touch, +44 7386 69 0897. I'll maybe ask ChatGPT to write a haiku with that phone number on it and see how
a
it
jingle.
gets on.
No, a jingle.
A
It needs
jingle,
a proper
a jingle.
jingle.
If you would like to submit a jingle singing, what, +44 7386 69
You think AI could? I bet AI could do that.
AI.
AI could
Well, there you go.
definitely do that.
You know how to get in touch and send us your best jingles. Get the band back together and tune into the show. So for the main recording, that's it from us. Check out the live show if you want to hear what Alan's got to say to the next question to ask him. But other than that, it's goodbye from everybody. Goodbye.
Bye,
Bye,
everyone.
everybody.
Right.